The Georgia sun hung heavy in the cloudless sky, turning Fort Bennink's rifle range into a furnace by mid-morning. Private First Class Maya Torres wiped sweat from her brow, trying to ignore how her BDUs clung uncomfortably to her back. The heat wasn't the problem, though. She'd grown up in New Mexico, where summer temperatures made Georgia look mild. No, the real heat came from the eyes boring into her back, 24 male soldiers watching her struggle, waiting for her to fail. She settled back into position behind her assigned M4, forcing her breathing to steady. 300 yards downrange, the paper target seemed to mock her. Her last grouping had been pathetic, shots scattered across a dinner plate-sized area instead of the tight cluster she needed. It wasn't like her. It wasn't anywhere close to what she was capable of. But they didn't know that. "Deep breath, Tors," she muttered to herself, acquiring the sight picture again. She pressed the trigger smoothly, felt the familiar recoil, and knew before the spotter called it that the shot had pulled left. Again. 5 o'clock outer ring, the range safety officer announced, his voice carrying across the firing line. Behind her she heard the snickers. Low voices, not quite whispered, meant to carry just far enough. "Told you. Can't handle the recoil. Why are we wasting range time on this?" Maya's jaw clenched, but she kept her expression neutral. 4 years in the Army had taught her that reacting only made it worse. She transferred from the 101st Airborne Support Battalion specifically to pursue combat arms reclassification. She'd known it wouldn't be easy. The military had only fully opened combat roles to women 2 years prior, and the cultural shift was happening at the speed of cold molasses. She fired her remaining rounds, each one feeling wrong the moment it left the barrel. When she finally cleared her weapon and stood, the frustration burned in her chest like acid. This wasn't her. She was better than this. But the rifle's gas system was clearly malfunctioning. She'd identified it on her first day but had made a calculated decision not to complain. The last thing she needed was to be labeled as someone who made excuses or demanded special treatment before she'd even proven herself. "Step back from the line, Private," the range officer called, already moving on to the next shooter. Maya complied, moving to the rear area where other soldiers waited their turn. She could feel their stares, could practically hear their thoughts. See, women can't hack it in combat roles. She'd heard it all before, in 1,000 different variations. That's when she noticed him approaching. Staff Sergeant Jake Brennan was a legend at Fort Benning, and not in a good way for anyone like Maya. 32 years old, 3 combat deployments to Iraq under his belt, expert marksman badge gleaming on his chest, and a reputation for being the most vocal critic of integrated combat units on the entire post. He was built like he'd been assembled from spare parts, 6'2", broad shoulders, the kind of presence that filled a room. Or in this case, filled the space between Maya and her escape route. His custom AR-15 was slung casually across his chest, a beautiful weapon that he'd reportedly spent thousands of dollars and countless hours perfecting. Maya had heard him bragging about it in the chow hall, hand-selected components, custom trigger job, enhanced optics, perfect balance. It was a serious shooter's rifle, the kind of weapon that costs more than most privates made in 3 months. "Having trouble, Private?" Brennan's voice carried that particular tone Maya had learned to recognize instantly, the condescending drawl of someone who'd already decided you weren't worth his time, but was going to enjoy watching you fail anyway. She turned to face him, keeping her expression carefully neutral. "The weapon's performance isn't optimal, Sergeant." His eyebrows rose mockingly. "The weapon's performance." He made a show of looking at her target, still visible downrange with its embarrassing scatter pattern. "Maybe it's not the weapon, Private. Advanced marksmanship isn't for everyone." Around them, soldiers were starting to drift closer, sensing entertainment. Brennan's buddies, 3 other NCOs who shared his views on women in combat, positioned themselves with barely concealed grins. This was going to be good, their expressions said. Brennan unslung his custom rifle with deliberate slowness, holding it up like a prize. "This," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "is what a real precision weapon looks like. Built it myself. Every component hand-selected. This rifle could make anyone shoot better." He paused, and Maya saw it coming before the words left his mouth. The smirk spread across his face like oil on water. "Try mine," he said, the condescension so thick you could cut it with a knife. He held out the rifle, but his body language screamed his expectations. He fully anticipated she'd fail even more spectacularly with his unfamiliar, high-end weapon. It would be the perfect proof of his theories. Women couldn't handle combat roles because they simply didn't have the natural ability. Give them the best equipment in the world and they'd still come up short. The crowd had grown now. At least 15 soldiers had gathered, and more were coming. Word spread fast on a military base when drama was brewing. Maya looked at the offered rifle, then up at Brennan's smug face, then at the crowd of expectant faces surrounding them. She could walk away, make an excuse, avoid the inevitable public humiliation. Or she could take the rifle. Her hand reached out, steady and sure, and wrapped around the custom weapon's grip. The balance was immediately apparent. This was indeed a beautiful rifle, perfectly weighted, professionally built. "Yes, Sergeant," she said quietly, her voice giving nothing away. Brennan stepped aside with exaggerated courtesy, gesturing toward the firing line like a ringmaster presenting the main act. His smirk was insufferable, confident, absolutely certain of how this was about to play out. He had no idea what was coming. Behind them, Sergeant Major Dixon, the range master and a 30-year veteran with more combat experience than everyone else on the range combined, watched the scene unfold with narrowed eyes. Something about the way Tors handled that rifle had caught his attention. The way her hands moved during the weapons check, the way she adjusted the sling, the subtle shift in her stance. That wasn't the movement of someone unfamiliar with precision shooting. "Range is hot," Dixon called, his voice cutting through the murmur of the crowd. Spectators stepped back behind the safety line. "Tors, you're clear to engage targets at 300 yards. Maya moved to the firing line, and the crowd fell silent, waiting for the show to begin. Maya's fingers moved across Brennan's custom rifle with the practiced efficiency of someone conducting a ritual they performed 1,000 times before. She checked the chamber, clear. Dropped the magazine, seated properly, 20 rounds of match-grade ammunition gleaming in the Georgia sunlight. Reinserted it with a decisive click that spoke of muscle memory burned deep into her nervous system. The weight distribution was noticeably different from the standard M4. This rifle was front-heavy, built for stability rather than rapid maneuvering. The enhanced optics alone probably cost more than her monthly salary. She brought the rifle up to her shoulder, testing the fit, adjusting the custom buttstock that Brennan had clearly sized for his larger frame. "Need help figuring out how it works?" Brennan called from behind her, drawing chuckles from his assembled audience. Maya didn't respond. She was too focused on what she was feeling through her hands. The trigger, she dry-fired once, twice, feeling the break, was spectacular. Crisp, clean, breaking at what felt like maybe 2.5 pounds. No creep, no grittiness, just a perfect press that would allow for precise shot placement if the shooter knew what they were doing. And Maya Tors definitely knew what she was doing. She just spent 4 years very carefully making sure nobody realized exactly how well she knew. Growing up in Alamogordo, New Mexico, Maya had been shooting since she was 6 years old. Her father, Gunnery Sergeant Ramon Tors, USMC retired, had treated marksmanship like some families treated religion, with reverence, discipline, and regular practice. Every weekend at the desert range, every summer at competitions across the Southwest. By the time she was 16, Maya had won her first state championship. By 18, she'd claimed 3 state titles and a silver medal at the National Long Range Precision Championship, losing gold by a single point in a shoot-off that still haunted her quiet moments. She'd enlisted at 19, drawn by the same call to service that had motivated her father, her grandfather, and her great-grandfather before her. 4 generations of Tor's warriors, her father called them. But Maya had quickly learned that her shooting resume, rather than being an asset, would make her a target of a different kind. The few times she'd mentioned her competition background in basic training, she'd been labeled a show-off, accused of thinking she was better than everyone else, isolated by resentment from fellow soldiers who should have been her teammates. So she'd learned to hide it, to shoot well enough to qualify but not so well that she stood out, to deliberately pull shots to make mistakes, to blend into the middle of the pack. It had been torture, like asking a pianist to play chopsticks when they could perform Rachmaninoff, but it had kept her under the radar. Until today. Maya settled into her shooting position, the synthetic stock cool against her cheek despite the heat. Around her, she could hear the whispers growing. This is gonna be painful to watch. Brennan's gonna destroy her. Why's she taking so long? Just shoot already. Sergeant Major Dixon stood at the spotting scope, his weathered face impassive. But his eyes were sharp, watching every microadjustment Maya made to her position. The way she adjusted her support hand, the way her breathing slowed, deepened, fell into a rhythm that experienced shooters recognized instantly. The way her entire body settled into the kind of rock-solid stability that couldn't be faked. "Something you want to tell me, Tors," Dixon called out, his voice carrying an edge of curiosity that made several soldiers look up in surprise. The sergeant major rarely showed interest in individual shooters beyond correcting their mistakes. Maya's eyes never left her sight picture. "No, Sergeant Major. You look awful comfortable with that rifle." "It's a well-built weapon, Sergeant Major." Dixon grunted, unconvinced but willing to let it play out. 300-yard target, 10 rounds. Your time starts when you break your first shot. Wind is 3 to 5 miles per hour left to right. Temperature is 94 degrees. Humidity is high. Adjust accordingly. Behind the firing line, Brennan crossed his arms over his chest, that infuriating smirk still plastered across his face. He turned to his buddy, Staff Sergeant Mike Chen, and spoke just loud enough for nearby soldiers to hear. "I give her 3 shots before she gives up. That rifle's got a learning curve, and she doesn't have the experience to." The rifle cracked, cutting off his sentence. Through the spotting scope, Dixon saw the impact. His eyes widened fractionally, the only outward sign of his surprise. He paused for just a moment, as if confirming what he was seeing, then his voice rang out across the range. "X-ring dead center." The murmur of the crowd shifted in tone. That was unexpected. Maya's breathing hadn't changed. She worked the trigger again, the same smooth press, the same perfect follow-through. The rifle barked. "X-ring, 1 inch from previous impact." Brennan's smirk faltered. Chen straightened up, suddenly paying closer attention. Maya fired again, and again, and again. Her rhythm was mechanical, relentless, each shot spaced exactly 3 seconds apart. Breathe in, half exhale, acquire sight picture, press, follow through, breathe. The rifle became an extension of her will, each round traveling downrange with purposes that seemed almost personal. "X-ring. X-ring. X-ring." Dixon's voice had taken on a different quality now. No longer routine range calls, but the tone of someone watching something exceptional unfold. The crowd had gone completely silent except for the rhythmic crack of the rifle and the distant ping of rounds impacting steel. Brennan's face had drained of color. His smirk was completely gone, replaced by an expression of dawning horror as he realized what was happening. Maya Tors wasn't struggling with his rifle. She was making it sing. 5 shots, 5 X-ring hits at 300 yards, a grouping that could be covered by a softball. Without pausing, without celebrating, without even looking up from her scope, Maya smoothly transitioned her point of aim to the 400-yard target. The crowd pressed forward against the safety line, nobody wanting to miss what happened next. Chen leaned toward Brennan and whispered, "Where the hell did she learn to shoot like that?" Brennan couldn't answer. He was staring at Maya's back, watching her body position, seeing things he'd missed before. The way her support elbow was positioned. The way her trigger finger moved with precision that took years to develop. The way she controlled her breathing like a professional. This wasn't luck. This wasn't beginner's fortune. This was mastery. And he just handed her the perfect weapon to prove it in front of everyone. The 400-yard target seemed impossibly small through the enhanced optics, but Maya's mind automatically calculated the adjustments she needed. Wind had picked up slightly, maybe 6 miles per hour now, still left to right. Bullet drop at this distance with match-grade .223 ammunition would be approximately 24 inches. The heat would affect the trajectory, thinning the air slightly. Her father's voice echoed in her memory, "Don't think, Mija. Feel it. Let your body remember what your mind wants to overthink." She felt it. The first shot at 400 yards broke clean. The recoil impulse rolled through her shoulder, absorbed and controlled. She didn't need to hear Dixon's call to know where it had impacted. She'd felt the perfection of it, that ineffable sensation when everything aligned exactly right. X-ring 400 yards. Dixon's voice carried a note of disbelief now, the professional veneer cracking slightly. High center. Around the range, soldiers who'd been casually watching were now transfixed. This wasn't just good shooting. This was something else entirely. Phones came out, people were recording now, capturing this moment that would be replayed in barracks and mess halls across Fort Benning by nightfall. Maya fired again. The brass ejected in a gleaming arc, catching the sunlight before clinking onto the concrete. Another perfect trigger press, another round downrange. X-ring, same point of impact. Brennan had stopped breathing. His custom rifle, the one he'd spent countless hours perfecting, the one he'd used to win the post-wide marksmanship competition 2 years running, was performing better in Tor's hands than it ever had in his own. The grouping she was building would qualify for national-level competition, at a military rifle range, with ammunition she'd never tested, with a weapon she'd picked up 5 minutes ago. It was impossible. Except it was happening right in front of him. Maya's third shot at 400 yards cracked downrange, then her fourth, then her fifth, each one placed with the same mechanical precision, the same perfect rhythm. She wasn't rushing, wasn't showing off, wasn't doing anything except executing fundamentals at a level that most soldiers would never achieve in their entire careers. "All X-ring," Dixon called out, and now there was genuine excitement in his gravelly voice. "I've got a 2-inch group at 400 yards. Tors, where in the hell did you?" But Maya was already transitioning to the 500-yard target, and Dixon fell silent, too invested in watching this performance to interrupt it with questions. 500 yards was where good shooters became great shooters, where all the variables compounded, where tiny mistakes became massive misses. The wind had to be read perfectly. The holdover had to be precise. The trigger control had to be flawless. At this distance, a target looked like a postage stamp, and the X-ring seemed impossibly small. The crowd had swelled to nearly 40 soldiers now. Word had spread beyond the immediate range. People were literally running from other training areas to witness what was happening. Even the drill sergeants from the adjacent obstacle course had wandered over, drawn by the commotion. Staff Sergeant Chen pulled out his phone, checking something quickly. His eyes went wide. He grabbed Brennan's arm. "Jake," he hissed, urgent and low. "Jake, I just Googled her. Maya Tors, New Mexico. You need to see this." "Not now," Brennan snapped, unable to tear his eyes away from the firing line. Maya had gone completely still, reading the wind. At 500 yards, a slight breeze could push a round several inches off target. She watched the mirage in her scope, saw how the heat waves bent and shifted. felt the air current against her cheek, noted how the flags downrange were moving. Then she fired. The wait for the round to reach the target felt eternal. At 500 yards, there was a perceptible delay between the shot and the impact, a moment of suspension where the bullet existed in flight, subject to forces beyond any shooter's control. Dixon's eye was pressed to the spotting scope. He watched the impact, blinked, looked again to confirm. X-ring 500 yards, his voice boomed across the range like a pronouncement from on high. Center mass. The crowd erupted in scattered applause, but Maya ignored it. She was in the zone now, that mental space where nothing existed except the rifle, the target, and the shot. For more times she pressed the trigger. For more times the rifle barked and recoiled. For more times Dixon's voice rang out with the same call. X-ring. 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 When Maya finally cleared the weapon, magazine out, slide locked back, chamber visually and physically inspected, the silence on the range was absolute. 40-plus soldiers stood frozen, processing what they'd just witnessed. This wasn't military qualification shooting. This was Olympic-level precision. This was the kind of marksmanship that showed up in record books. Maya engaged the safety, propped the rifle carefully against the shooting bench, and stood up. Her knees cracked slightly from holding position, but her expression remained neutral. She turned to face Brennan, who stood there looking like someone had just explained that everything he believed about the universe was wrong. She picked up his custom rifle and walked toward him, the weapon held properly, finger straight along the receiver. The crowd parted instinctively, creating a corridor between them. When she reached Brennan, she extended the rifle to him with both hands, the professional courtesy of one soldier returning another's weapon. "Nice weapon, Sergeant," she said quietly, her voice carrying in the silence. "Smooth trigger, excellent balance. You built something special." Brennan took the rifle automatically, his hands moving on muscle memory while his brain still struggled to process what had just happened. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. How did you?" "Tours," Sergeant Major Dixon's voice cut through Brennan's stammering. The old soldier was striding toward them, his weathered face showing more animation than most soldiers had ever seen. "Private first-class tours, front and center, right now." Maya snapped to attention. "Yes, Sergeant Major." Dixon stopped directly in front of her, eyes narrowed, studying her like a puzzle he was determined to solve. "I'm going to ask you one question, Private, and I want a straight answer. Where did you learn to shoot like that?" The crowd pressed closer, everyone wanting to hear this answer. Maya met Dixon's eyes steadily. "My father taught me, Sergeant Major. He's a retired Marine. I grew up shooting competitions in New Mexico." Dixon pulled out his phone, typed rapidly. The silence stretched as he read something on his screen. His eyebrows climbed toward his hairline. "Maya Tours," he read aloud. "Three-time New Mexico State champion. Silver medalist, National Long-Range Precision Championship 2 years ago." He looked up from his phone, his expression caught between impressed and irritated. "You're that Tours?" The murmur that ran through the crowd was electric. Maya stood at attention, feeling 40 pairs of eyes drilling into her from every direction. The secret she'd carefully guarded for 4 years had just been blown wide open by a simple Google search. There was no walking this back, no downplaying it, no returning to comfortable anonymity. "Yes, Sergeant Major," she said simply. "That's me." Dixon's jaw clenched, the muscles working beneath his weathered skin. He turned his phone around, showing the screen to the gathered crowd. On it was a photo from 2 years ago, a younger Maya standing on a podium, silver medal around her neck, holding a precision rifle almost identical to Brennan's custom build. The caption read, "Tours claims silver in dramatic final round at national championships." National championships. Dixon bit off each word. You shot against the best civilian marksman in the country and took second place, and you've been here for 3 months shooting like a rank amateur." His voice rose with each word. "Do you have any idea how many range hours we've wasted trying to bring you up to basic qualification standards?" Maya's cheeks flushed, but she kept her eyes forward. "I can explain, Sergeant Major." "This better be one hell of an explanation, Private." The crowd had gone completely silent. Even Brennan seemed to have forgotten his own humiliation, drawn into the drama unfolding before him. Maya took a breath. "In basic training, I mentioned my competition background once, just once, to my drill sergeant." Her voice was steady but quiet. "Within a week, I was isolated from my platoon. Other recruits said I thought I was better than everyone else, that I was showing off, that I was trying to make them look bad. My bunk got trashed twice. My gear went missing before inspections." Dixon's expression shifted slightly, understanding beginning to dawn. "I learned that being good at something, being known for something, made me a target," Maya continued. "So when I got to my first duty station, I decided to keep it quiet. Shoot well enough to qualify, but not so well that I stood out. I just wanted to be a regular soldier, Sergeant Major. I wanted to be judged on my day-to-day work, not on my background." "And the scattered shots today," Dixon pressed, before Sergeant Brennan offered his weapon. "The M4 I was assigned has a defective gas system, Sergeant Major." Maya's voice hardened slightly. "I identified it on my first day on this range. The cycling is inconsistent, the recoil impulse is wrong, and it's pulling shots left because the gas tube is partially obstructed." Dixon's eyes narrowed dangerously. "You identified a defective weapon and didn't report it." "I reported it, Sergeant Major." Maya's words dropped like stones. 3 times, to the armorer. "I was told I probably didn't know how to handle the recoil properly, and that I should focus on my fundamentals instead of blaming the equipment." The crowd's murmur took on an ugly edge. Several soldiers exchanged glances. They all knew exactly what that meant. A female soldier's technical assessment had been dismissed out of hand because of her gender. Brennan felt something twist in his gut. He'd heard Tors had been complaining about her rifle. He'd laughed about it with his buddies, made jokes about women always blaming their tools instead of their skills. Dixon turned to the range safety officer. "Carter, get me Tors' assigned weapon. Now, I want it field stripped and inspected within the hour." He turned back to Maya. "If you're right about that gas system, heads are going to roll. If you're wrong, we're going to have a very different conversation about integrity." "I'm right, Sergeant Major." "We'll see." Dixon studied her for a long moment. "Why didn't you push harder, go up the chain of command?" Maya's laugh was bitter. "With respect, Sergeant Major, how do you think that conversation would have gone? A female private, 3 months at this post, claiming the armorer doesn't know how to identify a defective weapon, insisting that the reason she can't shoot isn't her lack of skill but equipment failure." She shook her head. "I'd have been labeled a problem soldier before the day was out." The silence that followed was heavy with uncomfortable truth. Several of the gathered NCOs shifted their weight, suddenly very interested in their boots. Staff Sergeant Chen finally broke the tension. He stepped forward, his phone still in his hand. "Sergeant Major, if I may," at Dixon's nod, he continued. "I've been reading Private Tors' competition record. She didn't just take silver at nationals. She lost the gold medal by a single point in a shoot-off against a former Marine Corps sniper with 15 years of experience. She was 18 years old." He turned to address the crowd, his voice carrying clearly. "Her average group size at 600 yards in competition was under 3 inches. She's qualified on more than a dozen rifle platforms. She has certifications in ballistics, wind reading, and long-range trajectory calculation." He looked at Maya with something approaching awe. "Private Tors, you're not just a good shot. You're one of the best precision marksmen in the country." Maya said nothing, but her posture remained rigidly at attention. Brennan finally found his voice. It came out hoarse, barely above a whisper. Why did you take my rifle? You knew what I was doing. You knew I was setting you up to fail in front of everyone." Maya turned her head slightly, meeting his eyes for the first time since handing back his weapon. "Because I'm tired, Sergeant. Tired of hiding. Tired of making myself smaller. Tired of pretending I'm less capable than I am just to make people comfortable." Her voice was steel wrapped in silk. "You offered me a perfect rifle and an audience. I decided it was time to stop apologizing for being good at something." The weight of her words settled over the crowd like a physical presence. Dixon cleared his throat. "Well, Private Torres, you've certainly made an impression. The question now is what we do with you." He paused, considering. "You're applying for combat arms reclassification, correct?" "Yes, Sergeant Major." That just became a lot more complicated. At her confused expression, he continued. "You're too valuable to waste on a standard rifle platoon. We need to talk to some people, make some calls." He glanced at his watch. "Report to my office at 1400 hours. And Torres." "Yes, Sergeant Major." "Bring your competition resume, all of it. If we're going to do this, we're going to do it right." As Dixon walked away, already pulling out his phone to make calls, the crowd began to disperse, soldiers talking in excited clusters about what they'd just witnessed. The story was already transforming, becoming legend, growing with each retelling. Maya finally relaxed her stance, rolling her shoulders to relieve the tension. She turned to find Brennan still standing there, his custom rifle hanging loosely in his hands, his expression shell-shocked. "Sergeant Brennan," she said quietly, "I meant what I said. You built an exceptional rifle. In the right hands, it's capable of incredible precision." The unspoken implication hung between them. It had just taken a woman's hands to prove it. Brennan opened his mouth, closed it, then simply nodded. There were no words adequate to the moment. His entire worldview had just been shattered by 15 perfect shots. As Maya walked away toward the armory to check on her defective M4, Brennan stood alone on the range, staring at his rifle like he'd never seen it before. Everything had changed. By 1800 hours, the story had spread across Fort Benning like wildfire through dry brush. In the mess hall, clusters of soldiers huddled over phones, watching shaky video footage of Maya's shooting demonstration. The footage wasn't great, shot from too far back, the audio muffled by wind, but it was enough. You could see the rhythmic precision of her shots, hear Dixon's increasingly excited range calls, and catch the moment when Brennan's face went from smug confidence to absolute shock. The video had already been shared 300 times. Staff Sergeant Jake Brennan sat alone at a corner table, his food untouched, staring at nothing. He'd been sitting there for 20 minutes, immune to the noise and chaos around him. His phone buzzed constantly with texts from his buddies, but he ignored them all. "Mind if I sit?" Staff Sergeant Mike Chen didn't wait for an answer, dropping his tray across from Brennan with a clatter. "So, that happened." Brennan said nothing. "The armorer confirmed it, by the way," Chen continued, attacking his meatloaf with enthusiasm Brennan didn't share. "Torres M4 had a partially obstructed gas tube, just like she said. Been that way for at least 2 months based on the carbon buildup. Martinez is getting his ass handed to him by the company commander right now for ignoring her reports." "Good," Brennan muttered. "Good," Chen's eyebrows rose. "That's all you've got. Jake, you just got publicly embarrassed by the soldier you've spent 3 months telling everyone couldn't hack it in combat arms. The whole base is talking about it. Someone made a meme. You're a meme now, brother." Brennan's jaw clenched. "I'm aware." "And," Chen pressed, "what are you going to do about it?" "What can I do?" Brennan's voice was hollow. "I was wrong about her, about probably a lot of things." Chen leaned back, studying his friend with concern. They'd deployed together twice, had saved each other's lives in Ramadi, had been best men at each other's weddings. He knew Brennan better than almost anyone. "Talk to me, man. What's really going on in your head?" Brennan was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible over the mess hall din. My dad was in Vietnam, infantry. He used to tell me stories about his unit, about the brotherhood, about what made them special. He always said combat was men's work because it took a certain kind of strength, a certain kind of toughness that women just didn't have. He laughed bitterly. I grew up believing that, built my whole identity around it. And now I just watched a woman who weighs maybe 120 outshoot me with my own rifle in front of 40 witnesses. Everything my dad taught me, everything I thought I knew about what makes a good soldier. He trailed off, shaking his head. What does it say about me, Mike? If women can do this job as well as men, better than me apparently, then what the hell have I been? What was the point? Chen was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. You know what I think? I think your dad was wrong, and I think you've been using his wrongness as a security blanket, because as long as you could tell yourself that women couldn't hack it, you didn't have to deal with your own insecurities about whether you were good enough. Brennan flinched like he'd been slapped. Tors didn't take anything from you today, Chen continued relentlessly. She's been that good the whole time. Her being excellent doesn't make you less excellent. But you tried to make yourself feel bigger by making her feel smaller, and she had to call you on it. I know, Brennan whispered. God, Mike, I know. I can't stop thinking about it. 3 months I've been here watching her struggle, and I was happy about it. I wanted her to fail. What kind of person does that make me? The kind who can choose to be better, Chen said firmly. Look, you screwed up. Own it. Learn from it. But don't wallow in it, because that's just another way of making this about you instead of about doing the right thing. Brennan's phone buzzed again. This time he looked at it. The text was from Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Vance's aide. SSG Brennan, report to Battalion HQ, 800 tomorrow. Bring your training records and your current duty roster. His stomach dropped. I'm getting called to battalion. Chen grimaced. Yeah, that makes sense. Tors is probably going to need recommendations for the marksmanship unit application. Guess whose signature she needs? Mine, Brennan closed his eyes. She needs my recommendation, after what I did to her. Poetic justice, Chen observed. So what are you going to do? I don't know. I mean, she deserves it. That's not even a question. But how do I write a recommendation for someone I spent 3 months trying to undermine? How do I look her in the eye? Same way you do everything else in the army, Chen said. One step at a time, with integrity. Across the mess hall, Maya sat with a group of female soldiers from various units who'd sought her out. They peppered her with questions about the shooting demonstration, about her competition background, about how she'd stayed calm under pressure. For the first time since enlisting, Maya found herself talking openly about her skills without fear of backlash. How did you keep it together? Asked Specialist Jennifer Park, a combat medic. Knowing he was setting you up, knowing everyone was waiting for you to fail. Maya considered the question. I've been failing on purpose for 4 years, she said quietly. Today I decided I was done with that. Done being less than I am to make other people comfortable. Once I made that decision, the rest was just shooting. And I know how to shoot. Weren't you scared? Another soldier asked. Terrified, Maya admitted. But I was more tired than scared. Tired of hiding. Tired of apologizing. Sometimes you reach a point where fear matters less than just being done with the thing that's holding you back. The conversation was interrupted by a private first class approaching their table nervously. Private Tors, Sergeant Major Dixon wants to see you in his office. He said to bring your competition portfolio and to plan for a long conversation. Maya stood, gathering her tray. This should be interesting. What do you think he wants? Park asked. Maya smiled slightly. I think the army just remembered I exist, and now they want to figure out what to do with me. As she walked toward the exit, soldiers she'd never met nodded to her with respect. Some even moved aside to let her pass. The change was subtle but unmistakable. She was no longer invisible, no longer just another private trying to make it through the day. The attention was uncomfortable, but it was also validating in a way she hadn't expected. In his office, Sergeant Major Dixon sat across from Lieutenant Colonel Vance, discussing exactly what Maya suspected: what to do with a soldier whose exceptional skills had just been revealed in the most dramatic way possible. "The marksmanship unit wants her," Vance said. "I got a call from their commander 30 minutes after that video started circulating. They're prepared to fast-track her application." "She's exactly what we need," Dixon agreed. "Skilled, disciplined, and she's already proven she can handle pressure and adversity. But there's the politics to consider." "The politics," Vance repeated flatly, "being that she's a woman and we're going to catch hell from certain quarters for promoting her. Some people will say she's getting special treatment because of her gender, not despite it." Vance's smile was sharp. "Let them. Her record speaks for itself. National silver medalist. That's not special treatment, that's special talent. The kind of talent the Army can't afford to waste." She paused. "But she's going to need recommendations from her chain of command, including the NCOs in her current training program." "Including Brennan," Dixon said with distaste, "the man who publicly tried to humiliate her." "Yes," Vance agreed, "including Brennan, which means he's going to have to decide what kind of NCO he wants to be." Maya found Staff Sergeant Brennan exactly where she'd expected, in the armory after hours, methodically cleaning weapons that didn't need cleaning. It was what soldiers did when they needed to think, when their hands needed something to do while their minds processed the uncomfortable truths they could no longer avoid. The armory was quiet except for the rhythmic sound of a cleaning rod sliding through a barrel. Brennan looked up when she entered, and something flickered across his face. Shame, maybe, or the anticipation of a confrontation he knew he deserved. "Private Tours." He set down the rifle he'd been working on, straightening to a position that wasn't quite attention but wasn't casual either. Somewhere in between, uncertain of the protocol for this situation. "Sergeant Brennan." Maya closed the door behind her, the click echoing in the concrete space. "We need to talk." "Yeah," he exhaled slowly. "Yeah, we do." The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything unsaid over the past 3 months. Finally, Brennan broke it. "I owe you an apology, a real one, not just words." He met her eyes and she saw something raw there, something genuine. "What I did on that range, offering you my rifle like that, expecting you to fail, hoping you'd fail, that was unprofessional. It was cruel. It was beneath the uniform I wear." Maya said nothing, waiting. "But it's more than just that one moment," Brennan continued, the words coming faster now, like a dam breaking. "It's every time I dismissed your reports about the defective M4, every time I made a joke in the NCO break room about women in combat arms, every time I treated you like you were less capable before you'd even had a chance to prove yourself." He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "I made you the enemy, Tours. Not because of anything you did, but because of what you represented." "And what did I represent?" Maya's voice was quiet but steady. Brennan was quiet for a long moment, wrestling with truths he'd avoided examining for years. "Change. The end of something I thought made me special. My dad. He was Vietnam infantry, and he raised me on stories about brotherhood and sacrifice and what it meant to be a warrior. He always said combat was men's work, that it took a kind of strength women just didn't have. I built my whole identity around that. 3 deployments, expert marksman, combat action badge. Those things meant something because I thought they were part of an exclusive club." He laughed bitterly. Then the Army integrated combat arms and suddenly that exclusivity was gone. And I was terrified, Tours. Not of women failing in combat, of them succeeding. Because if women could do this job as well as men, if my gender wasn't what made me special anymore, then what the hell did I have? Who was I without that distinction? Maya absorbed this, understanding flooding through her. "So you tried to prove women couldn't hack it, to protect your own sense of worth." Yes, the admission seemed to cost him. Every time a female soldier struggled, it validated what I wanted to believe. I could tell myself, see, I was right, they can't handle it. It made me feel secure, I guess, in my place in the world. And now, my oppressed. Brennan gestured helplessly. Now I watched you pick up a rifle you'd never fired before and outshoot me, outshoot most of the men on this base, with a precision that most soldiers will never achieve in their entire careers. You didn't just beat me, Tors. You demolished everything I thought I knew. He paused. And you know what the worst part is? You could have done this any time. You've been hiding how good you are for 4 years because soldiers like me made you feel like you had to. Maya felt something shift in her chest. This wasn't the defensive deflection she'd expected. This was actual understanding, actual growth. I spent 4 years making myself smaller, she said quietly. Shooting worse than I'm capable of, keeping my background secret, accepting faulty equipment without pushing back. All because I learned early that being good at something, being known for something, made me a target. Her voice hardened. Do you have any idea what that's like? To have a skill you've spent your whole life developing and having to hide it, suppress it, pretend it doesn't exist, just to avoid making people like you uncomfortable. No, Brennan admitted. I don't. I've never had to make myself less than I am. I've always been encouraged to be more, to push harder, shoot better, be stronger. The Army has spent my entire career telling me to maximize my potential. He looked at her directly. While it's been telling you to minimize yours, and I was part of that, I enforced that. I'm sorry, Tors, truly. Maya studied him, looking for the catch, the angle, the hidden agenda. She found none. Just a man genuinely grappling with the weight of his own prejudices and their consequences. Why are you telling me this? She asked. You could have just stayed quiet, avoided me, let this blow over. Brennan reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Because Lieutenant Colonel Vance called me in this morning. The Army Marksmanship Unit wants you. They're fast-tracking your application, but you need recommendations from your chain of command. He held out the paper, including from me. Maya took it, unfolding it carefully. It was a recommendation form, already partially filled out. Brennan's signature line was empty. I could refuse, she said softly. After everything you've done, I could go around you, talk to Vance, explain the situation. They'd understand. You could, Brennan agreed. You'd be justified, but that's not why I'm here. I'm not trying to make a deal or trade my signature for your forgiveness. I'm here because I need to tell you the truth and you deserve to hear it. He paused. I was wrong about you. I was wrong about women in combat. I was wrong about what makes someone a good soldier, and I need to figure out how to be better than I've been. Maya looked down at the form, then back at Brennan. What made you change your mind? The shooting demonstration. Partly, he admitted. But mostly it was something my buddy Mike said. He told me that you being excellent doesn't make me less excellent, that I was trying to make myself feel bigger by making you feel smaller. And he was right. Brennan's voice grew stronger. I've been so focused on protecting my ego that I forgot what actually matters, making the Army better, making my soldiers better, serving something bigger than myself. That's a nice speech, Sergeant, Maya said, her tone neutral. But speeches are easy. Actions are harder. I know. Brennan met her eyes. Which is why I want to tell you that I'm going to sign that recommendation. Not because I'm trying to make up for what I did. Nothing I do can undo those 3 months. I'm going to sign it because you've earned it. Because you're exactly the kind of soldier the marksmanship unit needs. Because it's the right thing to do. He paused, then continued. But I also want to ask you something. My unit, we're getting female soldiers assigned to us next quarter. Combat arms integration. And I realized this morning that we're not ready. Not the unit, and damn sure not me. We're going to make the same mistakes I made with you, multiply them across an entire battalion, and hurt soldiers who deserve better. Maya felt a prickle of suspicion. What are you asking? I'm putting together a training proposal. Not just physical standards or tactical stuff, that's the easy part. I'm talking about culture, integration, how to actually create an environment where everyone can perform at their best regardless of gender. He took a breath. I want your help, your input, your perspective, because I clearly don't know what I'm doing and you've been living this reality for 4 years. Maya was silent for a long moment, processing. This wasn't what she'd expected when she'd come to the armory. She'd expected defensiveness, maybe a grudging apology at best. Not this, not genuine contrition and a request for partnership. "Why should I help you?" she asked finally. "Why should I invest my time in fixing a problem you helped create?" "Because it's not about me," Brennan said simply. "It's about the next Maya Tours who shows up at this base and the one after that and the one after that. If we don't change the culture, those soldiers are going to face the same garbage you did. And they might not be as strong as you. They might not have your skills or your resilience. They might just break or quit, or worse." He was right, and Maya knew it. She could walk away, take her recommendation, move on to the marksmanship unit and leave Fort Bennink's problems behind. 3 months later, Maya stood at a different range, wearing a different uniform. The marksmanship unit instructor's badge gleamed on her chest, newly minted and hard-earned. The past 12 weeks had been a blur of intensive training, evaluations and certifications that had pushed even her considerable skills to their limits. But she'd made it. She was officially Instructor Maya Tours now, assigned to develop and teach advanced marksmanship courses for soldiers across the Army. The early morning Georgia air was crisp, carrying the smell of gun oil and fresh coffee from the range office. Before her, 20 soldiers stood at parade rest, waiting for her to begin. 3 of them were women, Specialist Jennifer Park, the combat medic who'd sought her out in the mess hall that fateful day, Private Second Class Amanda Chen, fresh from basic training and desperate to prove herself, and Sergeant Lisa Morrison, a 7-year veteran making the transition from logistics to combat arms. Maya could see herself in all 3 of them: the determination, the uncertainty, the weight of representing their entire gender with every action. "My name is Instructor Tours," she began, her voice carrying across the range with authority she'd spent years learning to claim. "For the next 4 weeks, I'm going to teach you to shoot better than you've ever shot before. But before we begin, let's establish something important. I don't care what's between your legs. I don't care about your gender, your background, or your previous experience. I care about 3 things: discipline, dedication, and your willingness to be better today than you were yesterday." She paced along the line, making eye contact with each soldier. "Some of you requested this course specifically because you heard I was teaching it. Some of you are here because it was assigned. Either way, you're here now, and we're going to work together to make you the best marksman you can be." Private Chen's hand shot up. "Instructor Tours, is it true you beat Staff Sergeant Brennan in a shooting competition?" Maya smiled slightly. The story had grown in the telling, becoming almost mythical. "I didn't beat anyone, Private. I simply demonstrated my capabilities with an excellent rifle. This course isn't about competition between soldiers. It's about each of you reaching your maximum potential." "But you did embarrass him, right?" Chen pressed, earning nervous laughter from the group. "What I did," Maya said firmly, "was shoot to the best of my ability when given the opportunity. That's what I expect from each of you, not to beat each other but to challenge yourselves." She paused. "Now let's talk about fundamentals. Everything else is noise." The first week was brutal. Maya accepted nothing less than perfection in the basics: stance, grip, sight alignment, trigger control, breathing. She was patient but relentless, pushing each soldier to break bad habits they didn't even know they had. When Specialist Park struggled with her breathing rhythm, Maya worked with her for 2 hours after official training ended, until Park finally found the pattern that worked for her body. When Private Chen broke down in frustration after a particularly difficult drill, apologizing repeatedly for wasting everyone's time, Maya pulled her aside. "Listen to me carefully," Maya said quietly. "You don't apologize for learning. You don't apologize for taking up space. You don't apologize for needing time to develop a skill. Every expert was once a beginner, and every beginner deserves the time and support to become proficient. Understood. Chen nodded, wiping her eyes. Yes, instructor, it's just, I'm the youngest one here and I'm a woman and I feel like I have to be perfect or people will think. I know exactly what you think they'll think, Maya interrupted gently. Because I thought it too. I spent 4 years thinking it. But here's what I learned. The people who want to dismiss you will find a reason no matter what you do. So stop performing for them. Start performing for yourself. The words seemed to resonate. Chen stood straighter, nodded more firmly. Yes, instructor. By week 3, the improvement across the entire class was remarkable. Soldiers who'd arrived barely able to qualify at basic standards were now consistently hitting targets at 400 yards. The 3 women in the class were holding their own, neither outperforming nor underperforming their male counterparts, simply performing as individuals with individual strengths and weaknesses. Maya was reviewing training scores in her office when there was a knock on the door. She looked up to find Staff Sergeant Jake Brennan standing in the doorway, looking uncomfortable in the way people do when they're about to ask for something they're not sure they deserve. Instructor Torres, he said formally, do you have a moment? Maya gestured to the chair across from her desk. Sergeant Brennan, what brings you to my range? Brennan sat, a folder in his hands. I finished the training proposal we discussed, the one about cultural integration and creating better environments for mixed-gender combat units. He slid the folder across her desk. I was hoping you'd review it before I submit it to battalion. Maya opened the folder, scanning the contents. It was comprehensive, addressing everything from facilities and equipment to leadership training and accountability measures. There were sections on unconscious bias, on creating merit-based evaluation systems, on fostering team cohesion across gender lines. This is good work, she said, genuinely impressed. Thorough, thoughtful, you've clearly put significant time into this. I had help, Brennan admitted. I interviewed about 30 female soldiers across different MOSs, asking them about their experiences, what worked, what didn't. Turns out when you actually listen to people, you learn things. He smiled slightly, self-deprecating. Novel concept, I know. What kind of reception do you expect from command? Brennan shrugged. Mixed, probably. Some leaders will embrace it. Others will see it as political correctness run amok or unnecessary hand-holding. But I'm not really worried about that anymore. He met her eyes. I'm more concerned with doing what's right than what's comfortable. Maya studied him, seeing the change that 3 months had wrought. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something more valuable, humility combined with genuine commitment to improvement. There's something else, Brennan continued. My battalion is receiving its first female infantry soldiers next month. 10 women, all combat arms reclassifications, all nervous as hell about the reception they're going to get. He paused. Would you be willing to come speak to them, and to my NCOs, not as part of an official program, just as someone who's been through it and survived? Maya considered the request. Her schedule was already packed with classes, curriculum development, and her own continued training. But she thought about Private Chen, about Specialist Park, about all the women who were walking the same difficult path she'd walked. I'll do it, she said, on one condition. Name it. You sit in on the session with the female soldiers. You listen. You don't speak unless they ask you a question. You just listen to what they have to say about their fears, their experiences, their hopes. Can you do that? Brennan nodded slowly. Yes, I can do that. Then we have a deal. Maya stood, extending her hand. Brennan shook it, and for the first time the gesture felt like genuine partnership rather than mere professional courtesy. After he left, Maya returned to her desk and pulled out a notebook. In it, she'd been tracking something unofficial, a list of female soldiers who'd reached out to her since the range incident, asking for advice, mentorship, or just someone who understood. The list had grown to 47 names. 47 women who were trying to navigate the same treacherous waters she'd navigated. 47 soldiers who deserved better than what she'd received. Maya had become something she'd never intended to be, a symbol, a role model, a voice for change. The responsibility was heavy, sometimes overwhelming, but as she looked at that list of names, she felt something else too. Purpose. The rifle range incident had cracked open a door. Now it was her job to wedge it wider, to make it easier for those who came after her. One conversation at a time, one training class at a time, one changed mind at a time. 6 months after the rifle range incident that had changed everything, Maya stood in front of a classroom at Fort Benning, facing an audience she never expected to address. 50 NCOs from Brennan's battalion filled the seats, platoon sergeants, squad leaders, team leaders, all men who would soon be leading the first integrated infantry companies on post. The tension in the room was palpable. Some faces showed genuine curiosity. Others wore skepticism like armor. A few looked openly hostile, arms crossed, jaws set, already decided that whatever she had to say was political correctness propaganda they'd be forced to endure. Brennan sat in the back row, keeping his promise, just listening. "Thank you for being here," Maya began. "I know this isn't how most of you plan to spend your Thursday afternoon. I'm going to make this as valuable as possible for your time." She clicked to the first slide, not a PowerPoint presentation, just a photograph of her at 18, standing on that national championship podium with her silver medal. "This is me 6 years ago, national silver medalist in long-range precision shooting. I'd been competing since I was 6 years old, trained by my father, a Marine Corps veteran. I was good enough to go pro, to make a career out of competitive shooting." She paused. "Instead, I enlisted, because I wanted to serve something bigger than myself." She clicked to the next slide, her basic training graduation photo. "This is me at 19. I just finished basic and I was full of optimism about my military career. I thought my skills would be valued. I thought I'd be judged on my performance, not my gender." Her voice hardened slightly. "I was wrong." For the next 20 minutes, Maya laid it out. Not a sob story, not a complaint, just the facts. The isolation when she'd mentioned her competition background, the decision to hide her abilities, the years of deliberately underperforming to avoid becoming a target, the defective rifle and the dismissive armorer, the constant weight of representing her entire gender with every action. "I became an expert at making myself smaller," she said, "at taking up less space, at being less capable than I actually was, because I learned that being good at something meant being punished for it." She looked directly at the hostile faces in the front row. "And every single one of you is about to have female soldiers in your platoons who have learned the exact same lesson." That got their attention. "Here's what I need you to understand," Maya continued. "The women joining your units aren't asking for special treatment. They're asking for the same thing you wanted when you joined, a fair shot, a chance to prove themselves, standards applied equally and evaluated honestly." She clicked to another slide, performance statistics from her training classes. "These are the qualification scores from my last course. The top 5 shooters included 2 women. The bottom 3 included 2 men. Gender didn't predict performance. Training, dedication, and opportunity did." A hand went up. Sergeant First Class Marcus Webb, a crusty infantry veteran with 20 years in. "With all due respect, Instructor Tours, shooting paper targets isn't the same as combat. How do we know women can handle the physical demands, the stress, the violence?" Maya had expected this question. "Sergeant Webb, I can't answer that from personal combat experience. I haven't deployed to a combat zone. But I can tell you this. I've trained with women who carried the same loads, met the same standards, and demonstrated the same tactical proficiency as their male counterparts. I've watched women push through injuries, exhaustion, and conditions that would break lesser soldiers, regardless of gender." She paused. "But you don't have to take my word for it. In 6 months, you'll have your own data. Your female soldiers will show you what they're capable of if you give them the environment to succeed. Another hand, Staff Sergeant Kevin Park. What does that environment look like, specifically? This was the opening Maya had been waiting for. It looks like evaluating everyone against the same standards without prejudice. It looks like addressing equipment issues promptly instead of assuming the soldier is making excuses. It looks like not tolerating sexual harassment or gender-based harassment from anyone, regardless of rank. It looks like judging performance, not appearance. It looks like creating teams where everyone is valued for their contributions, not questioned because of their chromosomes. She clicked to her final slide, a photo from last week's training class, showing her students, male and female, working together on a complex shooting drill. This is what right looks like, she said. Soldiers training soldiers. No special treatment, no lowered standards, no separate but equal facilities. Just competent professionals making each other better. The room was quiet, NCOs processing what they'd heard. Brennan stood from the back row. Instructor Tours, thank you. I think I speak for everyone when I say this has been educational. He looked around at his fellow NCOs. I was exactly where some of you are now, skeptical, resistant, convinced that integration was a mistake. Then I got proven wrong in the most public way possible. Several NCOs chuckled, having heard the story. But that embarrassment was the best thing that could have happened to me, because it forced me to confront my own prejudices and ask myself what kind of leader I wanted to be. He turned back to Maya. You've given us a lot to think about. The question is, what do we do with it? That's up to you, Sergeant, Maya replied. You can resist, complain, and make it harder for everyone, or you can lead. Actually lead by example with integrity, creating the kind of unit where every soldier can thrive. She looked around the room. The women joining your companies didn't create this situation. Congress and Army leadership did. But those women are still soldiers who took an oath to serve. They deserve leaders who will help them succeed, not undermine them at every turn. After the presentation, Maya met with the 10 female soldiers joining Brennan's battalion. They gathered in a small classroom, nervous energy crackling between them. These women ranged from 20 to 35, from various backgrounds, all making the leap into combat arms. Private First Class Sarah Martinez spoke first. Ma'am, how do we? What if they don't want us there? What if we're perfect and they still find reasons to criticize us? Maya smiled sadly. Then you document everything, you maintain your standards, and you remember that you're not doing this for their approval. You're doing it because you're soldiers and you've earned your place. She paused. But I'm also going to tell you something I wish someone had told me. You don't have to hide your competence to make others comfortable. If you're good at something, be good at it. Own it. The right leaders will recognize and value your skills. The conversation continued for 2 hours, covering everything from practical advice about equipment to strategies for handling harassment to building support networks. By the end, the women looked less terrified and more determined. As they filed out, Specialist Jennifer Park, now assigned to Brennan's unit, hung back. Instructor Tours, I just wanted to say thank you for everything, for being visible when it cost you, for speaking up when it would have been easier to stay quiet. Maya felt something tighten in her chest. Make me proud, Park. Show them what you're capable of. I will, ma'am. That evening, Maya sat in her office, updating her unofficial list. The 47 names had grown to 93. 93 women who'd reached out, seeking guidance, support, or simply proof that someone like them had made it. Her phone buzzed, a text from Brennan. Battalion Command approved the training proposal. Implementation starts next month. Thank you for pushing me to be better. Maya stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, Thank you for being willing to change. She looked around her office, walls covered with qualification scores, training schedules, photographs of successful students. 6 months ago, she'd been Private First Class Tours, hiding her abilities, playing small, just trying to survive. Now she was Instructor Tours, shaping the future of Army marksmanship, mentoring the next generation, forcing conversations that needed to happen. The journey from that rifle range to this office had been exhausting, often frustrating, sometimes painful, but it had also been necessary. Maya thought about that moment when Brennan had offered her his rifle, expecting her to fail, giving her the perfect opportunity to prove him catastrophically wrong. One moment, one choice, one decision to stop hiding and start owning her excellence. That moment had created ripples she was still discovering. Minds changed, policies reformed, doors opened for women who came after her. The rifle range incident had become legend, yes, but its real impact was quieter and more profound. Conversations started, assumptions challenged, systems slowly bending toward equity. She'd owned that range with Brennan's rifle, firing 15 perfect shots that shattered expectations and demolished excuses. But in doing so, she'd started something bigger than herself. She'd become a catalyst for change, whether she'd wanted that role or not. Maya pulled out a blank piece of paper and began drafting a proposal of her own, an advanced marksmanship course, specifically designed to prepare female soldiers for the unique challenges they'd face in combat arms roles. Not because they needed different standards, but because they needed different support systems. The fight wasn't over. Integration was policy, but culture changed slowly, one reluctant mind at a time. There would be more Brennans, more skeptics, more soldiers who needed proof that women belonged. Maya was ready to provide that proof, one shot at a time, one student at a time, one changed perspective at a time. She'd stopped apologizing for being excellent. Now she was teaching others to do the same. And that, she thought, was worth every difficult moment of the journey. The end.